The wind howled across the blackened plains, sweeping fine ash into spirals that glimmered faintly beneath the fractured moon. The tents barely held together anymore, stitched from scraps of metallic fabric, humming faintly with static where the seams met. Inside one, Sayalera pressed her claws against the trembling chest of her youngest hatchling. His scales had dulled to gray-blue, and each breath came out as a weak rasp that echoed like static through the hollow night. Her other two children slept beside him, wings folded tight, their small tails coiled together for warmth. The heat stone at the tent's center flickered uncertainly, its energy core fading. She had once commanded storms. Her wings had carried her over the crimson spires of the Scathrin peaks, where the skies were pure and dragons ruled the air. But the war had burned those skies into cinders. Now the air carried only the mechanical whine of human patrol drones scanning the wastelands for survivors. Monsters, as they called her kind. She had learned to move in silence, to breathe shallowly, to keep her fire low and hidden. Outside, a faint rumble tremored through the ground, rhythmic and heavy. Not drones, footsteps. She turned, eyes narrowing, and drew her tattered cloak over her shoulders. Through a gap in the tent, she saw a faint orange glow bobbing between the ruins. Someone was walking alone, carrying a portable lantern, an old model, analog flame, not energy-based. Strange. Humans didn't use firelight anymore. Silara's throat tightened. Her instincts screamed to flee, to wake the hatchlings and vanish into the fog. But exhaustion had dulled her reflexes. She watched as the figure stumbled closer, dragging what looked like a mechanical pack behind him. A man. His clothes were torn, a mix of old military and scavenger gear. His face was pale under the lantern's glow, and though his boots crunched through glass and bone, his movements held no aggression. He looked lost. Still, she unsheathed her claws and whispered to the hatchlings, "Stay quiet." The stranger stopped a few meters from the tent, raising his lantern as though sensing the heat of living breath nearby. Then he spoke, his voice low, worn, almost kind. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "If anyone's out here, I've got food and clean water." Selara froze. No human had ever spoken those words to her. The rain began without warning, thin hissing droplets that glowed faintly as they struck the scorched ground. Acidic, laced with industrial residue from long-forgotten factories. The man reacted first, pulling a shimmering membrane from his pack and unfurling it overhead. It expanded with a soft pulse, creating a translucent dome that bent the rain away in a faint hum of electromagnetic energy. Salara watched him through the slit in her tent, torn between instinct and disbelief. The shield was old human tech, from before the wars, a relic. He turned toward her shelter. "You shouldn't stay out here," he called, his voice steady against the storm. "The rain will eat through that fabric in minutes." His words carried no command, only concern. That confused her more than any weapon could. Humans didn't warn dragons. They hunted them. Still, she remained silent. The hatchlings stirred behind her, one letting out a soft chirr that cut through the wind. The man heard it. He stepped closer, slow enough to show he knew he was being watched. The light from his lantern brushed against his face, tired eyes, streaks of gray in his hair, and a faint scar running down his jaw. He looked like someone who'd seen too much of the world and survived it anyway. When the first drop burned through the tent roof, hissing on the floor, Selara acted. She burst through the flap, wings half flared in defense, her claws gleaming under the lantern's light. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he placed the dome between them, extending its cover so the acid rain rolled harmlessly away. "I told you," he murmured. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." The hatchlings peeked from the tent, their luminous eyes reflecting curiosity rather than fear. Selara growled softly, warning them back, but they hesitated. The man, Elias Wren, though she wouldn't know his name yet, reached into his pack and withdrew a sealed ration pack. He tore it open, letting the scent drift through the air. It was fruit, preserved from hydroponic growth cycles. Real food. Selara's gaze flicked between the offering and the stranger's calm eyes. Her claws flexed. "Why?" she hissed in her low, draconic, accented tongue. "Because no one should die alone out here," he said simply. The rain intensified, but under the soft hum of the energy shield, For the first time in years, the dragon woman and her children stood dry. The morning came in shades of pale silver, the air heavy with the scent of ozone and dust. Silara stood outside the shelter, her wings folded close as she watched Elias work with quiet precision. He had built a small purifier from pieces of old drones and fragments of circuitry scavenged from the ruins. When he connected the final conduit, the device emitted a low hum, drawing vapor from the air and condensing it into drops of clean water. The hatchlings stared wide-eyed, their reflections rippling across the clear surface of something they hadn't seen in weeks. Ilias handed the smallest one a container, smiling faintly as the little creature's tail coiled in wonder. Silara observed him with suspicion that was beginning to erode into reluctant curiosity. "You craft like an engineer," she said, her voice low and careful, "yet you wander like a scavenger." He glanced at her. "Used to build ships for the colonial fleet," he replied. "Now I just build what keeps me breathing." His tone carried no bitterness, but something deeper, quiet exhaustion. She understood that tone. It belonged to those who had lost everything and kept moving anyway. They walked together that day, cautiously leaving the camp behind to search for supplies. The world stretched around them like a wounded machine. Fields of twisted metal, shattered satellites half buried in soil, towers humming faintly with the ghost signals of long-dead networks. Above, the sky shimmered with faint data streams, remnants of orbital AIs still whispering in broken code. As they scavenged, Sayalera asked questions. Why he helped her, why he didn't fear her kind. He answered with honesty that felt strange in a world built on lies. "I saw what fear did," he said. "It ended everything. I'm done feeding it." That night, they shared a fire of bioluminescent moss, its blue light soft against the ruins. Silara's children slept close together, and Elias sat across from her, mending a torn sleeve with careful stitches. Silence stretched between them, not empty, but peaceful. For the first time in years, she realized she wasn't listening for the hum of approaching drones. The humans' steady breathing and the warmth of the light were enough to keep the dark at bay. The valley revealed itself like a secret the planet had tried to forget. A sudden break in the wasteland, where fractured stone gave way to living soil glowing faintly beneath a veil of mist. Elias led the way, brushing aside vines that shimmered with traces of circuitry, bioengineered flora, remnants of terraforming projects abandoned centuries ago. Silara followed with wary grace, her eyes scanning every ridge, her wings drawn tight against the humid air. The hatchlings raced ahead, their laughter, half hiss, half chirp, echoing through the hollow canyons like music no machine could replicate. Elias stopped beside a stream that glowed with faint blue light. "Nanite runoff," he explained, "still active, still purifying the water." This place must have been an experiment site. He dipped his hand into the liquid. It came up clean. "It's safe." Silara watched him, uncertain whether to trust his science or her instinct. Yet when her eldest hatchling bent down and drank, unharmed, she exhaled a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The tension that bound her for years began to loosen, thread by thread. Together, they began to build. Elias used scavenged plasteel and fragments of drone armor to erect a frame, while Silara wove heatstone veins through it to regulate warmth. The fusion of human engineering and dragoncraft produced something neither species had ever made before: shelter that breathed. By nightfall, a small dome shimmered with a gentle pulse, powered by captured lightning. As darkness fell, the valley awoke with sound. Trees emitted faint tones when wind brushed their surfaces, forming harmonics that resonated with the ground. The hatchlings played within those frequencies, their scales reflecting the rhythm like living prisms. Elias listened, spellbound, while Silara studied him from the shadows. He was strange, fragile, yet capable of creating beauty from ruin. When he caught her gaze, he smiled faintly. "We could make something lasting here," he said. Silara turned her face toward the shimmering sky, where distant satellites still blinked like forgotten stars. "If the world lets us," she murmured. But deep within, she dared to imagine, for the first time, a home not made of fear. The warning came at dawn, a shriek of static bursting from Elias's handheld scanner, followed by a flicker in the valley's energy field. Saylara lifted her head sharply, her pupils narrowing to slits. The hatchlings froze mid-play as the ground vibrated faintly. Above, a streak of artificial light cut through the clouds. Human patrol crafts. The world had found them. Elias ran toward the control node embedded in the valley wall, fingers flying across its cracked display. They locked onto the energy signature, he muttered. Our fusion core gave us away. His voice was calm, but his pulse trembled beneath the words. Saylara spread her wings, their membranes glowing faintly with heat. Then we will fight, she said, her voice deep and unshakable. We protect the nest. Moments later, the first drone descended. Sleek, silent, its metal skin rippling with adaptive camouflage. Elias hacked into the valley's defense grid, reawakening systems that hadn't stirred in centuries. Static arcs flashed across the perimeter, and dormant turrets rose from the soil like iron flowers. Saylara launched into the air with a roar that rippled through the clouds. Her flames struck the drone's shield, bending it until it screamed and burst into molten shards. More followed, hundreds this time, flooding the valley like a swarm. Elias rerouted power, channeling energy from the terraforming roots into the defense network. Lightning surged through the bioengineered trees, creating a lattice of plasma that burned through the incoming metal tide. The air smelled of ozone and ash. Saylara dove low, her wings brushing the canopy, shielding Elias as debris rained around them. He shouted code strings into his comlink, forcing the enemy systems to loop their own targeting software. Together they fought, not as human and dragon, but as one creature of survival and fury. When silence finally returned, the valley was scarred but alive. Elias collapsed to his knees, smoke curling from his suit. Saylara landed beside him, folding her wings around his trembling form. You fight like one born from flame, she murmured. He laughed weakly. You just haven't seen humans when they're protecting home. Weeks passed, and the valley began to heal. The blackened soil grew green again, nourished by the roots of trees that drank power from both sun and circuitry. Elias moved slowly now, his left arm wrapped in layers of synthetic bandage where shrapnel had burned deep. Sayara's hatchlings followed him everywhere, their scales brighter each day. Sometimes he caught himself smiling at their mischief, as if the universe had remembered how to be kind. Humans came eventually, not soldiers this time, but wanderers, refugees, and engineers who had heard whispers of a place where dragons lived beside a man. They arrived cautiously, expecting death, and found a valley humming with peace. Elias greeted them with the same calm patience he once showed Saylara. The dragons watched from the cliffs at first, their eyes glowing softly in the dusk. Over time, the fear between species began to fade. A new rhythm formed, humans repairing ancient tech, dragons shaping stone and fire, children of both kinds playing beneath the bioluminescent trees. At night, Saylara and Elias would sit at the edge of the valley, the horizon lit faintly by the auroras of distant orbital debris still burning in the upper atmosphere. They will come again, she said once, her gaze distant. The ones who see us as a threat. Elias nodded. Then we'll remind them what we built. Not a fortress. A home he had rebuilt their shelter from the wreckage of war machines, merging human steel with dragon heatstone. The walls pulsed faintly, alive with warmth. When Sayalara's youngest hatchling curled beside him, resting its head on his lap, she watched in silence, a gesture of trust no dragon had ever allowed before. As night fell, the valley lights shimmered like a constellation come to earth. The wind carried voices, laughter, songs, the crackle of fire. Saylara folded her wings around Elias and her children, her scales reflecting starlight. The humans have a word for this, he whispered. Home. Saylara smiled softly. We call it Heartfire. And for the first time since the world burned, the stars above them seemed to listen.